So Apple's new M2 chip has started making its way into the hands of reviewers via the new MacBook Pro, which is just the same old MacBook Pro, and we're seeing all these videos going into deep benchmarking where the thermals are going all the way up to over 100 degrees Celsius and the core clock speeds are not running at 3 point whatever they're supposed to and all this stuff, so you really shouldn't buy this M2, right? Well, let's talk about that. So obviously I don't have the budget of a big YouTuber, so I can't really buy a brand new MacBook Pro on a whim to test out a bunch of stuff, so I do what most of you do if you're interested in a new piece of tech, which is read a bunch of reviews about it and kind of combine the information you get from a lot of reviews into one decision that you then decide to make or not make. And for me, I've been reading a bunch of reviews about the M2 MacBook Pro, knowing that I'm probably not going to buy it, but that the M2 chip as a whole is fairly interesting to me. And I've seen a lot of reviews talking about the thermals, the new power limit, and the frequencies. And for me, I feel like these are kind of unnecessary. Now, don't get me wrong, I have no problems with testing newer machines against older machines just to see where the differences are, and I actually did a video that basically did that. You can check it out right over there. But for me, the biggest things that I focused on were the benefits in real world, and a lot of the tests that I ran focused on time differences, whether it be render times or export times, things like that, which for most people will be something that you can actually visually notice. And in that video that I just linked to, I made a specific effort to point out that I was not going to be using GFX Bench, Geekbench, or Cinebench. Now, the reason I use this testing methodology instead of synthetic benchmarks is because I feel like when people are looking at a program that they would actually use and are seeing a notable improvement in render times or export times, this is something that you can actually put context to because you're familiar with what a good render time would be for Premiere or Final Cut, and when you see that it is actually faster than a machine that you are familiar with or that you've been using, you know that there is actually a real-world benefit. Whereas when you look at the numbers coming off of Cinebench, if you've never run Cinebench on a machine that you're looking at the score of in Cinebench, and you see that another machine that you may have never used has a higher score, that's cool, but you don't have context to how that will benefit you. And it also kind of brings out the things that people tend to focus on more that don't often matter, at least in this specific chip with the M2. For me, I just feel like synthetic benchmarks are extremely niche and really only things that get run once for a lot of people or never for the average consumer, and it doesn't really give you a good perspective of what the computer is actually going to be doing on its day-to-day, especially when you're running these tests on something like an M base model like the M1 or the M2, because these chips are focused on the general consumer. They're meant to be power efficient while still being reasonably powerful. And on top of that, if you take a look at the kind of user that Apple is marketing this chip and computer towards, it is highly unlikely that they are actually going to be spending an extended period of time pushing this CPU to 100%. I mean, it's more expected that the MacBook Air isn't going to be running at 100%, but also with this MacBook Pro, this is the MacBook Pro that somebody buys when they don't want to fork over $2,000 for the bigger, better, awesome MacBook Pro, and they want to get something that just has the Pro name in it. I know I was a college student who wanted that at one point, no shame in it, but that's kind of what this is aimed for. You want the Pro Mac, but you don't want to fork over $2,000 for the actual Pro Mac. That's kind of what this is marketed towards, and to be honest, unless you are somebody like me where you actually do have a very focused set of tasks you want to use that you know are going to push this machine to its limits, you're probably going to end up using it to browse Facebook, do homework, general tasks with the occasional iMovie export, and that is 100% not representative of the results that you're seeing when people throw out these Geekbench scores. Those kind of general tasks are most likely what these machines are going to see for their entire life, and having the overhead that they do does mean that they are going to have a, hopefully, fairly extensive life down the road because of how much performance overhead they have currently. But at present day, for browsing the web, checking emails, small stuff like that, listening to music, you're going to be running on the efficiency cores. And when you do want to edit a photo or maybe touch up a video off your iPhone, that's going to be running on the performance cores, but that is going to be few and far between. I actually, in another video, talked about how when it came to hard-hitting, heavy-use performance on my Mac Studio, I noticed that that was where the benefit really was. And because that Mac Studio with the M1 Max chip is focused on professional, high-end use cases, you see that benefit as soon as you push it to its limit. However, when I'm browsing the web or generally just looking at YouTube videos, whatever the case may be for your general tasks, it never touches the performance cores. It is all running on the efficiency cores, and it feels no difference in snappiness or performance to my M1 Mac Mini, which is currently living its life as a server. I'm kind of ranting in this video, but when I went and watched these reviews on a machine that I was kind of interested in because I wanted to know how the next generation of Apple Silicon was performing, I found a lot of reviewers sort of getting lost. They couldn't see the forest for the trees because they honed in on the higher thermals and the fact that the core frequencies weren't running high enough. But to get those results, they were running synthetic benchmarks that really didn't speak to any real-world performance. And potentially, and I've seen this, I used to be a salesperson at Best Buy, and I saw this all the time. These reviews complaining about the thermals when pushed to the limit, or complaining about the core frequencies when pushed to the limit, these complaints and videos were seen by the general public, and that really made them hesitant to buy the newer chip, even though for 100%, or let's call it 99.5% of their work, this machine would be perfect. I'll give you an example. When the M1 chip first came out, and the big thing was the ARM transition, and they had to change a bunch of apps over for ARM, I saw not only people coming to this decision on their own, but salespeople telling other users who were interested in buying the new Apple Silicon Mac that it wasn't ready yet. It wasn't good enough yet because it didn't work with standard Intel apps and they needed to convert everything over. My cat wants to say hi. However, this conclusion that I saw customers and salespeople coming to was based on reviews that were saying that these apps that were running on the Mac didn't run natively, but they were completely ignoring the fact that the performance of these chips and the fact that they could be translated through Rosetta meant that you weren't missing out on a lot of performance. And of course, now that we're sitting well into the 2-year mark of the Apple Silicon transition, these apps have been moved, and the people who bought these Intel Macs because of the recommendation to avoid M1 at the start are going to be stuck with these Macs or stuck with making a really pricey decision to replace them sooner than they really should have. I guess at the end of the day, what I'm saying is if you know what kind of work you're going to be doing and you're in the market to buy a new computer and the M2 MacBook Air or the M2 MacBook Pro look promising or just generally interesting to you, don't be swayed and don't be confused by thermals run by synthetic benchmarks or scores that show that it's only a little bit better than the older machine. Just pick what you think will fit you best for the longest period of time. And this is kind of a philosophy that I've lived by for a very long time. And I made an exception when I bought the M1 Mac Mini, and that was out of sort of desperation to replace the failing keyboard MacBook Pro I had. But in my case, when I buy something, I don't look for synthetics. I look for how it benefits my day-to-day work. And that's really how you should shop anyway. So if this video was helpful, I really hope it was. If it was, leave a comment down below. I hope that you guys actually got something out of this. I'm sorry I kind of ranted, but it got under my skin to see people sort of bashing the M2 for thermals that really only became an issue when you ran synthetic benchmarks that 99% of users aren't going to run. So at the end of the day, like I said, I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, leave a comment. Like if you like this video, dislike. But if you do dislike, leave a comment telling me what you disliked and how I can improve for the future. Make sure to subscribe. I got a bunch of other stuff to talk about, and we've got another video this week talking about the new Apple Watch OS and the few things that I have to say about it. And we've got a lot of things covering all of the new stuff for, well, WWDC, the whole 9 yards. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there, and have a good one.